If you are seeking funds, you have to have protected your IP. The last thing an investor wants is to give someone money only to learn that several months later or a year later that the business they've invested in has to totally rebrand because they were unintentionally infringing on somebody else's mark.
Welcome to Manage Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work.
This is our last episode with Lauren. I'm so sad, Lauren, that we've already covered all of our topics already.
It's been so much fun, though.
I know. Lauren is not just a trademark attorney. She is a brand protector, a storyteller, and an advocate for female founders who want to lock in their legacy. You've already learned so much about Lauren if you've listened to our other episodes. But if you haven't, she's the founder of Storylock Legal. She helps entrepreneurs safeguard the brands that they've worked so hard to build, ensuring that their names, logos, and creative assets are truly theirs. Over the last 3 episodes, we've really understood what all of that meant from the founder's perspective while building the business. But now we're going to kind of shift our focus here. So if I'm a founder who's looking to exit, or maybe more importantly, raise VC money, legal hygiene is not just about protecting yourself. It's also about those dollar signs, Lauren. So what are investors looking for in our data room from this perspective?
If you are seeking funds, you have to have protected your IP. The last thing an investor wants is to give someone money only to learn that several months later or a year later that the business they've invested in has to totally rebrand because they were unintentionally infringing on somebody else's mark. And believe it or not, it happens all the time. So if you are, seeking investments, you've got to make sure that you've cleared and protected your name at a minimum. And then so that's number 1. But let's say that you're building your business with your exit plan in mind. You're like, I'm going to build, I'm going to work for 5-10 years, and then I'm going to exit. The more IP you've protected, the greater the valuation of your company. I mean, look at a company like Poppy that just sold for, a million gajillion dollars. Poppy built up so much goodwill and brand recognition and protected their trademarks that goodwill and that brand, that protected brand, right, creates so much of the value of the company. And the way that you create that value is by locking in your trademarks, locking in your slogans, locking in your logos, and then policing them in the marketplace to make sure that nobody else is infringing on your brand. That is the way you increase your goodwill. That's the way that you create a strong, strong brand. And you have to remember too, anytime you have or you gain a trademark registration, those are assets of your company that can be monetized. So once you have a trademark registration, you can license, you can franchise. I mean, there's so many different things that will add value to your business. Even simple brand collaborations, you are in a much stronger negotiating position if you have a registered trademark.
That's actually an interesting thing that I didn't even think about in terms of even being just in a stronger position once you have that trademark when you're negotiating or because you don't think about it, I'm filing it to then monetize it in some way.
Right.
But it could be.
Yeah. And a perfect example, I mean, we just had the Olympics, right? That's just ended. But those Olympic rings, right? Think about the brands that fight to get those Olympic rings on their own products. So obviously that's a crazy extreme example. But if you built up a strong brand, people are going to want to license your mark. People will pay you money to put your mark on their own product or service. So it's a great way to create a passive income stream. But in order to do that and in order to build these revenue streams, you have to protect your brand. So again, not necessarily just your name, although your name is extremely important, but if you're really building, looking to exit, think about all of the different things that you could protect with a word mark, a logo that includes your words, or simply an icon like the Nike swoosh or the
Hmm.
Lululemon swirly thing that everyone recognizes now if you're in the world of athleisure, which so many of us founding female moms are, in that world and wear that every day. So, those are all important assets of your company that when you protect them properly, when you monitor them to make sure no one's infringing and police them, and you've done your due diligence and you're building this strong brand, making sure you're cohesive and consistent with your branding is another huge,
Mm.
huge issue. But when you do this properly under the guidance of an IP attorney, you can really make significant income from your trademark registrations.
Would you say that most investors these days are pretty savvy in this area and know the right questions to ask?
I mean, I can't say for sure just because I've never tried to seek funding, but I would think if you're looking to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, and you're going to put that into a company, you're going to know the questions to ask. You're going to dot all your
Yeah.
I's and cross all your T's because you're not going to take chances.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about how you came to sort of your overall mission of turning business dreams into protected legacies, right? So I guess first, what drove you into trademark law? Let's start there.
So I've always been a huge reader and writer, and I've always loved like that creative journey. And I wanted to be a writer, but of course, my practical dad was like, "You can't be a writer. You're not going to make it. Go to law school." And he's a lawyer. My dad does entertainment work. He's still working, but slowing down a little bit. But I knew that I didn't want to do his kind of work just because there's a lot of ego involved in that. And that's just not my cup of tea. I really wanted to help people like me that are, building their own businesses.
Yeah.
So really, I didn't stumble across it. My dad had told me to take some IP classes in law school, and I took a trademark class and fell in love with it. I've always been totally intrigued by names. I grew up with two boys with the same name, and I was always like blown away by like their identities, right? Because they had to establish their own unique identities growing up in the same grade and the
Yep.
same small Jewish community with like the same people. It was not easy. And I've always just been very fascinated by the way names tell whole stories. And so out of law school, my first job was at a prominent trademark IP boutique firm here in Miami, and I loved it. Got scared to pigeonhole myself, a little too early. So I branched out, did some commercial litigation, clerked for an appellate court judge, pivoted when I had my kids because my little one had some pretty severe health problems. But when I was on my pivot, I was blogging a lot and I was really meeting a bunch of female creators who just weren't protecting themselves properly. And I was
Mm.
like, I really would love to help. I didn't really know how. And then COVID hit and the whole world went online. And I was like, all right, hung up my shingle and I was like, here we go. And the rest is history. So it just became so important to me to empower women because some of these women were building amazing businesses like from their playrooms, but weren't
Hmm.
protecting themselves properly. And so it just became my mission to help female founders really protect what they're building and have a legacy to, pass on to their own kids if they wanted to down the road. And I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the name thing. My mom grew up as Jennifer M because of course Jennifer was such a popular name when she was growing up. And then she wanted to make sure we had unique names. And I remember the first time I ever met another Katrina, I was in high school and I was like so floored and very confused. Like, wait a minute, who are you and why do you have my name?
And that's so funny because your mom, Jennifer M, I was always, in growing up, I was Lauren B or LNB because there were so many Laurens. And
Yeah.
when I got to college, my entire sorority was named Lauren. So no one even
Lauren
knew
is a pretty popular one. Yeah.
from like, I was born at the end of the 70s and, people didn't even know our first names because we all went by our last names. So I was Burke or Berkey to everybody. And even in law school, people would call me Burke or Berkey because there were so many Laurens. And so it's funny because now, I'm pushing, I'm almost 47. But when I hear, if I'm in the grocery store and I hear someone shout, Berkey, I'm like, oh, there's someone who goes way back with me. And my kids are like, Berkey. But yeah, because, I've always been intrigued by names and by naming things. And I love a good trademark tells a whole story. You can
Yep.
see the whole brand story. And that's part of how I created my name.
Yeah, I really love that. It's still to this day there is a not only a Katrina, but there is a Katrina Purcell who lives in Australia who has a similar Gmail to my personal Gmail because obviously it's a combination of my first and last name. And I do enjoy her life because sometimes I get like, her reservations for restaurants in Australia or like
Oh
info
my
about,
gosh.
yeah. And at one point I was finally able to email her and say, when I found out her real email and say, your family emails me your family photos all the time. And like, while I appreciate looking at them, you might want to let them know what your real email is.
That is hilarious. Well, when I was divorced, so I was married, and when I was married, I was Lauren Davis. And I went from being Lauren Bercuson, literally the only one in the world. Bercusons we're all related if you meet another Bercuson, to not even being able to get an email address. And it was so jarring that when I got divorced, I was like, okay, my kids at least have the same name, but I'm going back.
Yeah.
It was so weird for me to have the same name as like a million other people. And I was like, okay, at least I'm going back to Lauren Bercuson and then I'll be unique again. It was so odd.
So let's talk a little bit as we wrap up our final episode of our series on how your fractional flat fee model works for startups as they're scaling.
Absolutely. So most of my, my scrappy startup founders who I love that are bootstrapping will start with my Trust Your Trademark package, typically for one mark, which is usually their word mark. I have a $2,500 package and it's all inclusive. So it includes your full comprehensive search, my analysis, all of our conferencing and emailing, getting your application on file, drafting it, obviously, first, getting it on file, and then following it through the whole patent and trademark office journey, obviously, to the end goal, which is registration, but obviously that can never be guaranteed. So the only things not included in that fee are your patent and trademark office filing fees, which are $350 per class. If you file an intent to use application, you'll have to file additional fees of $150 down the road. And then, obviously, of course, if we have any kind of a substantive refusal from the PTO, those would be a separate fee. I also will try to ballpark and give a flat fee based on the amount of issues involved. And then typically, for a brand new startup, they're usually going to do one mark. But then I have clients that want to do 2 or 3 marks. And then I have clients that want more of a real like strategic partner, growth partner. So
Yep.
for 2 and 3 marks, it's the same, Trust Your Trademark package, but I have bundle pricing. But then if you're really looking for a strategic partner and you want quarterly strategy meetings and you want me to monitor your trademark portfolio and really kind of keep checking in to see how you're growing, if you have new services that you're offering or new products with new names, are you vulnerable? Are your existing trademark registrations covering you? Where are their risks? And then I become more of a strategic partner. And that's also on a recurring flat fee basis.
Okay, perfect. I feel like that's actually just the perfect way to wrap up this 4-part
Yeah.
series. So just as a reminder, folks, this episode is for informational purposes only. It is not legal advice, but if you love legal advice from Lauren, you can contact her at the links in the show notes. And she has just so eloquently told you exactly how you can work with her. It is so easy. And Lauren is an absolute joy to spend time with. So you would be in
Aw.
wonderful hands and also have fun while you're doing it.
Thank you. It was so great to be here and to spend so much time with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Lauren. And we will see everyone on the next episode of Managed Chaos Podcast.
Outsourcing your US tech talent shouldn't be hard. With Pobble.io, we deliver high-quality teams on demand and provide huge cost savings to your business. Try it now at Pobble.io. Mention the amazing guys at Manage Chaos when you email us and get a free market data report. Email contact@powell.io.